If you ask most evangelicals why their churches don't have statues and why the Catholic Church does, they will probably tell you because the Bible condemns the worship of graven images, and the Catholic Church has taken on many pagan beliefs. They get that from the book of Exodus, chapter 20, where God forbids graven images. Now, if you read the whole chapter in context, what he says is do not make any graven images as idols and to worship them. And if you read the whole book in context and come to chapter 25, you'll read God giving Moses instructions how to make the Ark of the Covenant, in which he tells him to make graven images of angels to sit on top of the ark. So did God forget what he said in chapter 20? No, you have to read it in context. And what God is saying is don't make images to worship. Make them for the glory of God. So very early on, the church believed this. You know, I know many Catholics who really don't know much about Catholic theology, just like I know many evangelicals who don't know much about evangelical theology. But I never once met a Catholic that worships statues. In fact, we have mentally handicapped adults that visit our church. We actually have a ministry to them. And even they know it's a mortal sin to worship a statue. The early church had no problem with statues. So where did this heresy come from? I'm going to tell you in a moment. Okay, so the early church didn't have a standard Bible like we have today. They had letters written by the apostles that they would read in the church. But until the Catholic Church decided on the canon late in the 5th century, or 4th century rather, we didn't have like a whole Bible written. They would read the letters that eventually the Catholic Church decided should belong in the New Testament. And thankfully the evangelicals accept that Catholic teaching and have the same New Testament that we do. But then even once the book was completed, it would take about 2 years to complete a Bible and would cost about 3 years' wages. Until the great country of America showed the world the power of capitalism, bringing people out of poverty, most of the world was in poverty. And most of the world was illiterate. So even when the Bible did become available, most people couldn't read it. So they still went to the church to hear or afford it. So most people went to the church to hear the Word of God. And the church in her wisdom built beautiful churches once it was legalized, once Christianity was legalized in the 4th century, started building churches for the glory of God, beautiful churches with beautiful art. And they would depict the life of Christ. So you could bring your child in and show them, this was the virgin birth. This is baby Jesus. This is where he grew up to be a man. These are his apostles. This is the crucifixion, and this is the resurrection. It was right there in the stained glass windows and in statues. So you could teach a little child or an illiterate adult the gospel message every time you walk through that church. And even today, we have this to teach our children and to remember the great things of God. And every Catholic church has a crucifixion, a cross with Jesus being crucified on it. And they're required to have an empty cross as well. Unlike the Protestant church, we tell the whole gospel. We tell the whole gospel because you can't appreciate the resurrection if you don't understand the crucifixion. In the same way, you can't appreciate being forgiven unless you realize you're a sinner. So, where did this come from that Christians thought that statues and beautiful art was sinful? Well, the heresy started in the 1st and 2nd century with something called Gnosticism. The Gnostics believed that all matter was evil. So art was evil. Statues were evil. They even believed since matter was evil, Jesus could not have come in the flesh. They didn't believe in the incarnation. They thought Jesus was just a spirit, that he wasn't fully man and fully God like all Christians believe today. So the Catholic Church early on condemned this heresy. But like all heresies, it raised its ugly head up again, like they always do, under a different name. So in the 8th century, iconlasm, if I'm saying that correct, the iconists believed that icons were evil and statues were evil, so they would start destroying them. And the Catholic Church condemned that as a heresy. And then, again, this raises its ugly head in the Protestant Reformation. The Protestants claimed in the 16th century that the Catholics were idolaters because they had statues. So they started destroying Catholic art. Any art, Michelangelo, any art they can get their hands on, they were destroying. So imagine if it wasn't for the Catholic Church preserving this beautiful art, we would have none of this in history. There would be none of this beautiful art that the Catholic Church has helped form Western civilization with. And even today, not so much in the Christian world. I mean, there's this cult called the Jesus Freaks that go around destroying statues in Catholic churches, and they're really nasty. If you Google them, they're really nasty people. Kind of like the equivalent to the Black Hebrews, but they're white, but they're just real nasty. Other than those guys, you don't see much of this happening within Christianity. You see it happening with radical Muslims destroying churches. That's why when the cathedral in France, Notre Dame, was on fire, my first thought, unfortunately, was this was done on purpose by radical Muslims over there, because every day in France, at least 2 or 3 churches are vandalized. It goes unreported because they're small vandalism and they don't want people to get mad at all the Muslims, but these radical Muslims are destroying statues and burning Catholic churches every day. For the past 2 years, there's been at least 2 or 3 vandalism of Catholic churches in France. So when this happened at Notre Dame, I kind of thought, wow, they got in, especially it was Holy Week. But they're saying it was an accident. So unless I see evidence of otherwise, I'm not going to come up with any kind of conspiracies. I'm going to accept it because I like to see the evidence of things. But my point being is, thank God for the Catholic Church preserving the art throughout the years, and our culture and our history, and the world would be a dark place without the Catholic Church and the beautifulness of our cathedrals and all our art that we have. And today's Easter, so I want to wish you a happy Easter. And I want to thank my evangelical brothers for observing Easter on the day the Catholic Church says we should observe Easter. And God bless. Bye.